Today I'm talking to Julia Goldstein, and Julia Goldstein is a sage and a maker, and she's an author, and she does a lot of research, and she is so smart in the field of sustainability. Julia, thank you so much for being with me today. I'm so excited to learn from you.
Thanks. I'm happy to be on your podcast.
Yay! So you're a sage and a maker.
Yeah, you want to know what that means.
I
There,
do.
there are all kinds of different personality assessments, and there's one called 𝗙𝗏𝗪𝐻. And it has to do with I don't even know how many different options there are, but there are a lot of them. And it's really about how you are going to best function at work. And a lot of people who take this, they're maybe looking at a career change or something like that and saying, how can they bring their best selves to work?
Okay.
And you do this, there's a whole lot of questions, and then it comes out and you have a primary and a secondary. And my primary is the sage, which means that I get fired up explaining things to people, teaching people and inspiring them to do something differently. That's what gets me excited. And then my secondary is the maker, which is about creating things. And that could be physical things, that could be, I write books. That's one of the things that I do. And sometimes I actually make other physical things, but I do it in the service of the sage in me,
Mm,
meaning not just for the sake of making something, but for also the sake of sharing it
mhm.
and letting other people learn from what I'm making. It's no good if it's just out. I mean, there's some satisfaction in making the thing, but it's even better if I can use it to inspire other people.
Wow. Yeah, for sure. I hear that. Okay. Um, I want to do that now. I want to do that quiz.
Oh, yeah, I can
I
somewhere
wonder
in
what
the
I've.
show notes, you can maybe put a link and people could try it out. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be fun. Ooh. So if you guys, I'm going to put that in the show notes, you guys, and I want you to take the quiz and fill me in. Tell me how you scored. Um, but so that's really interesting, and I to be a person that gets fired up explaining things is so uncommon. It's so uncommon, and I love it because I need more people like you in my life. I just get
Well, thank
flustered.
you.
um, but so you had so many things that you really get excited about, not maybe not fired up, but you really enjoy talking about. And I was just telling you before we started recording that I have a jam business, and so like packaging is such a racket for that, and so that I could ship. But also like composting and recycling was a really big one for me because it's such a questionable thing. We've been recycling plastic for so long, and then to find out, that only, what is it, 9% of the plastic is actually recycled.
That
Um,
used to be true. It has gone down. In my book, Rethink the Bins, that came out in 2020, I put a chart in and it had gone down to about 4% in I'd have to look. I haven't memorized the chart, but I think that was like in 2018 or 2019, and then it was predicted to go down even further. And
so
what
it's worse
happened
now.
was it's worse. It's worse
Oh,
because, and again, your listeners, you may or may not be aware of this, but in 2018, China suddenly changed the rules. So what was happening is people in North America and Europe were all sending their bundles of recyclables to China. They were paying well for this. And so it's like that was great. Collect all the stuff in the big blue bin. We've gone a lot to do this single stream recycling, which is super easy for
right,
individuals.
right,
It's, oh, you think it's recyclable? Toss it in the big blue bin. You don't have to really think about it that hard. You just put it all in there and it's magically going to disappear and get recycled.
right.
A lot of it was going to China. Now we don't really know what was happening to it when it was going there. And then finally they said, we are not going to be the world's garbage dump. We're going to stop this. And so the recycling industry in the United States and some other countries went into a bit of a panic.
Right.
And I remember talking with some people in the recycling industry at the time, and some of them also saw it as an opportunity
Mm.
because the companies that were really doing proper sorting and providing higher value recyclables, and a lot of those were things that are more easily recyclable, metals and paper and such.
Mhm.
But even if they could have clear streams of plastic that were, say, just plastic water bottles or just milk jugs or some of those kind of things, and they could process those recyclables and get money for them, it was an opportunity to revamp the systems here and make them more
Yes.
effective because there wasn't the option of sending all the stuff overseas. But the reality is a lot of people are still completely confused about what to do and either say, oh, the recycling system is broken, I can't do anything, forget it. Or, well, I'm just going to dump everything in. And I've gone to walks in my neighborhood and you see the bins and that they're overflowing, right? These carts, because people pile so much stuff in there, they can't close. And I look at what's in there and yeah, and I take pictures sometimes.
Yeah. That's gonna get thrown away. It's gonna go in the trash.
It's like,
Or
yeah,
it's gonna
and
be in
then
the ocean.
the whole batch. And there's some places like within the city of Seattle, they put some more stringent regulations, especially on businesses.
Mm.
Like if you have a food service business, a restaurant, those kind of things, is if it looks like garbage, you're going to get fined. Now, I don't know how much they're
Ooh.
actually doing that. But within the city of Seattle, and that's
Mhm.
not all of the whole greater Seattle area, but there were just a lot more rules and that like fast serve restaurants, quick serve restaurants had to put things in compostable packaging. Now, we have in the Seattle area industrial composting facilities right nearby so they can be processed. A lot of places don't have that.
Mhm.
So, what on earth is going to happen to that compostable packaging if there's no place to process it?
Right. Ugh. Oh gosh. It's so frustrating. And I know that like oh, I was so super fired up during the pandemic. There was a period a couple years where my town said it's too expensive to recycle glass. Just throw it away. It'll be better for everyone if you just throw it away. And I was like, absolutely not. Absolutely not. It's not an option. Like, other people can do it, but I'm not contributing that way because glass is one of the very few things that can be recycled ongoing, right? Like paper.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. So glass and metal can be processed over and over and over again without losing quality. And that's assuming you have a clean stream of it. There's
Right.
some complexities with glass, meaning they have to separate out the different colors of glass
Mm.
because they have different chemical composition. And if you mix them all together, well, you can still get stuff that is, say, cover for a landfill or some really low value applications. But if you want to make it into more glass bottles and containers, it
Mm-hmm.
needs to be
Clean.
sorted.
Yeah.
And the other issue with glass, it's heavy, and so
Right.
it's expensive to transport. And there aren't as many glass processing facilities as there ought to be.
Right.
For example, I don't think there are any between Seattle and Minneapolis. And now this is not a highly dense population, but people live in those places in between
Right.
and they don't have access to glass recycling because they're not going to truck it 1,000 miles to get it to a processing plant.
Right. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I was ready to propose with absolutely no money, obviously. I just have this like wild childish dream of, let's just one of these empty buildings, let's just make a glass recycling facility and buy a mold and we can make new jars. Because like for my jam business, jars were ridiculously hard to find. Like they were literally back ordered for months. And when you could find them, they were at least double the price. And then my town saying, let's just throw it away. I was like, whoa, if we could figure out how to make our own jars locally, because there's nothing, there was also like a sand shortage, which that's what I was told. There was a sand shortage, which made glass jars harder to, I don't know. It was just a big mess. And I was
Yeah,
like, we
it's
just have to
again,
make our
yes.
own jars.
And there's ways to do this better. There's also these things can be reused. And I think that's really an important benefit as well. And in fact, so my next upcoming book, Materials and Sustainability, goes into even more different materials than my first book that came out in 2019. And in the glass chapter, we talk about things like we used to have glass milk bottles, and there was a milkman, it was probably always a man then, who would deliver them. And my co-author actually remembers having that experience living near London where
Oh,
they would get these glass bottles. And if you go and reuse those bottles, 30 times, that is really cost effective and you're saving on that glass. And yes, sometimes they will break and
mhm.
then you're done with it. And then hopefully it can go get to a glass processing facility and get made into a new
Right.
bottle. But it can be reused over and over and over again. Bottle bills work. The states that have deposit schemes where you pay upfront
Mhm.
and then you can get the money back when you return the bottle to the store have much higher glass recycling rates, like 90 something percent compared to overall 30% for the whole US.
Wow. Those are astounding numbers. And there are
Yeah.
only like there are very few states that
Yeah, I think it's 10 states. It might be 11, 10 or 11. I don't remember all the data, but
yeah.
it's in there in one of my books. Anyway,
Yeah, we'll get there. Anyway, well, and on the note of milk bottles, this is something
yeah.
that I'm currently uh, struggling with because the options for milk right now are those cardboard cartons that are coated in plastic or wax. So they're not compostable, they're not recyclable, they just have to go in the trash, or a plastic bottle or a plastic jug.
Yeah, a plastic jug and a plastic jug is actually probably a better option, if it's going to be collected and recycled and the mixed recycling isn't such a disaster that they're just gonna dump it all. There are also brands that have milk in glass bottles. Now, it is a lot more expensive. And is somebody going to pay? Well, some people will pay twice as much for
Sure.
it's a premium product and it really tastes better. I remember this was probably 2004 and we went on this trip to the Midwest and went to this farm where they had fresh milk in glass bottles. And I remember it being just the most delicious milk I'd ever had. And
It's
part of it is
super
it's fresh from a
creamy and
farm,
yeah.
but part of it's also that it's in a glass bottle because the plastic does convey a taste. I mean, it's subtle. We get used to it.
Right.
But you get used to certain things. For example, you think that soda and beer come in aluminum cans. Water doesn't come in an aluminum can. I remember having actually some water in aluminum cans, and my son looked in the fridge. He says, "What kind of beer is this?" I said, "This is not beer. This is water." And he said, "What?" Because it's just we have that association.
Water
And the
doesn't
water
come
is
in a
totally
can.
fine to drink from aluminum. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just we have not become accustomed to doing that.
Interesting. Right. And I've seen now the water comes in a cardboard box. Like you can buy water
Well,
in
yeah,
a
but that's going to be plastic coated because if it were just cardboard, it would
right.
seep through a box.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's a racket. It's becoming a racket. Anyway, let's get away from that because it's
Okay.
we might not be able to solve that today. But so let's see. You oh my goodness. So one of the things that really excited me about talking to you, Julia, is your the way that you said we can influence businesses through our buying decisions. And that's a really big deal. And it doesn't sound like a really big deal, but we have a lot of power. We just need to use that power.
Absolutely. And consumer behavior does make a difference. I mean, just think about stuff like certified organic food. 20 years ago, that was kind of more of a niche thing that the fancy people did or the hippie people did, but everyone didn't get, organic produce. And now, I mean, you find organic everything. And it's in all the mainstream stores and it's become more affordable, because people are buying it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's other things where if people choose not to buy them. And I was saying one of the things I don't buy anymore that I used to years ago are Ziploc bags or these plastic, that's just one brand, right? There's other brands of these zipper top baggies.
Right.
I literally, I don't think I've bought any of those in the last 10 years, truly, because it's like, I don't need it. Now, what if everybody who listens to this podcast, what if everybody who, ever hears about this says, oh, I'm not going to buy any more of these either? Well, suddenly the companies aren't going to make them if nobody's buying them and they're not coming off the shelves. Now, is that realistic? No, most people are not listening to this message at all. And so they will continue buying those and they'll go to Costco and buy 5,000 of them or what have you and just use them because they've got lots and lots and lots and lots. And I don't mean to pick on Costco. There's some good things about the company. However, there is that tendency to say, oh, look, I can buy so much.
I'm going to have plastic bags forever.
And when you have that much, you feel like, oh, well, yeah, we've got lots and lots of it. We can just keep using it. It's never going to run out. And instead, so what do I do instead of those plastic bags? Reusable containers. And some of them are plastic and some of them are glass. I really like the glass ones. And then you can reheat in the microwave and not worry about, you shouldn't reheat stuff in plastic containers in the microwave for the most part. But anyway, so the glass containers are great, but even plastic ones, I have plastic ones that have lasted years and years and years and years and years. So it's not like, oh, all plastic is bad, get rid of all the plastic, because there's some zero waste groups that think that. Well, no, if you've got functional plastic that you are reusing and you are using for its purpose, great, keep using it, as long as it's not toxic and, other issues. Right. But in any case, and then sometimes there are products that you buy in the store that just come in a zipper top kind of bag. And if you can go to the store and try to avoid those products, then you've got even less of it. But if you do, let's say you have family members that really like some particular product and that's how the only way it comes packaged, well, you can reuse those.
Yep.
Until they're torn and not really good anymore. There are just a lot of different options. And in the freezer, I put things in containers. You don't need to wrap them individually in plastic. What I find is if I have individual pieces of something where you could freeze them on a cookie sheet, separated from each other. And then once they're frozen, you can put them all in a container and they're not going to smush all against each other.
Right. Oh, that's really clever, actually. I just recently talked to somebody who has a YouTube channel and she's teaching people how to make their own sandwich bags out of fabric and stuff, which is very cool. My husband is an arborist and he eats so many sandwiches every week, and he was a Ziploc bag. Every single sandwich had to be in a fresh Ziploc bag because otherwise it's going to contaminate and whatever. And so we went through so many. And then one year I was going crazy and somebody that I know was making those and I bought 6 of them, and he's gotten really good at using them. And we also reuse deli meat comes in, often a plastic Ziploc bag and bread bags. We use bread bags because I do not make bread.
Bread bags. I do make bread, and I started a sourdough starter in 2019, so I was ahead of the curve in doing that, and it's still alive. But I was actually thinking of making bread today, except for I'm in Seattle and it's going to be 93 degrees today, so I am not turning on my oven to make bread. Although I might make some in the barbecue on the patio, because I have a kind of barbecue that you can actually kind of bake in if you don't put stuff directly, if you do it like indirect heat, right? You turn on one burner and heat it up, and honestly it's so hot out the barbecue can heat up to 400 degrees pretty quickly, and so you can kind of use it to bake. And
Could you use like
then
a pizza stone? Do you have a pizza stone that you could put on?
I do, and this barbecue supposedly comes with one that's actually shaped for it, but I wasn't
Ooh.
able to find it at the store. But yeah, I have made pizza with a stone in the barbecue. You got to not turn on the burner underneath it because then
Mm.
that'll probably break the stone. But you can have the adjoining burners on and then bake your pizza. Yeah, there's a lot of things you can do. See, that saves energy too if you don't have to keep the oven on for hours and hours if you've got a barbecue that heats up quickly. Then, of course,
Absolutely.
you're using propane or natural gas, but in any case, we gotta cook somehow, right?
We do have to cook somehow. My gosh. But yeah, so the influencing businesses, voting with your
Yeah.
wallet is how,
Yeah, and
in my
just,
simple brain.
yeah, choosing, and sometimes it's choosing to buy less. There's also one of the great things that's around are these buy nothing groups.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you participate in yours locally,
Absolutely.
and there's I mean, in my neighborhood, there's a mix of people, and some people are getting things that they aren't even in their budget to buy otherwise, and a neighbor has it. And other people could absolutely afford to buy as many of them as they needed, but instead they get it from the neighbors. And oh, I got this Tupperware thing that stores a half-cut onion, and it's this dome-shaped one. Somebody didn't want it. I love it. It's
Yeah.
great.
We
And
just saw
also
one
it's
at
a
the flea market the other day, just on
yeah,
Saturday.
sure. So again, this other person in my neighborhood, they weren't using it. It was cluttering up their kitchen, but I I use it because often you buy these onions, they're really big and you don't use the whole onion at once and then, you want to store the rest. I'm not gonna the other thing I don't buy is plastic wrap because you don't need to have that. You just as long as you've got something to close up keep the thing airtight,
Right.
it'll store fine in your fridge. But anyway, and there's also chances to borrow things, right? There's a lot of stuff where you realize, wait a minute, I'm going to use this maybe once a year. I don't need to buy one. I can borrow one from somebody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very clever. I mean, I think that yeah, I've said this many times, but I have a note behind my laptop that says community sufficiency. Instead of, because initially I wanted to do a homesteading podcast and learn about homesteading, but I feel like it can be a little exclusive sometimes, and so I'm going with sustainability, and so that phrase just stuck out at me, and community sufficiency. Like, there are so many things that I can do by myself, but I don't want to. Like, it takes a long time if you have someone to help you, or like what you were just saying, borrow something, like get to know your neighbors, share talents, share items. I've had my neighbor say, do you have any flour? I always have flour. I do enjoy baking, but so we'll do stuff like that. And I think that it's so important to get to know your neighbors and to
Yeah.
utilize that system. It's a really good
Yeah. And
idea.
and the way that, that program's set up, they're not necessarily the people right on your street, which you can do in a more informal way.
Right. Yep.
They might be half a mile away, but you can yeah, you can ask for stuff, you can give stuff, it's just this whole kind of sharing community, and I think a lot of younger generations are really embracing that, and with the idea, wait a minute, maybe we don't need to own so many things, or they host clothing swaps.
Mm-hmm.
People sometimes they always keep wanting a new outfit, but you don't want to buy so much clothing. Well, one way is if you
Right.
get a community together and okay, I'm kind of tired of this, I'm going to let somebody else have it, and then you've got new to you clothing. Or I love to shop at consignment stores. I've gotten some great things there, and so that's another way of just thinking about what companies are you supporting with the stuff that you buy. And there's some things maybe you'll realize, well, wait, I don't need to buy it at all. Other
Mm-hmm.
things, necessities. We're not saying, oh, you've got to do without and you have to go back to some, vow of poverty. I mean, I feel bad for people who really have to or are in that
Right.
situation where they can't afford the necessities. But when you're talking about people who have those kind of choices, you can say, okay, yes, I need this type of product, but maybe I'll make a I'll look a little more carefully at the label, or I'll think about what store do
Mhm.
I want to support? Where do I want to buy it? And there are just a lot of choices that we can all make. And if, a whole community starts making these choices, well, maybe stores are going to change what they decide to order and what they carry and what they provide to people. Or it could be there's something that you wish were available that isn't, and you can ask for it.
Ooh, yeah. That's great. That's a really great suggestion, actually. Thank you for bringing that up. That's really
Welcome.
fun. And so I do want to. You have 3 books. Is it 3 books? Do you have more than 3?
So yes, I've published
Or
3 books.
on sustainability at least.
Mhm. Yes.
And so one of them, I found out without realizing you get it for free if you subscribe to her newsletter. So anyone who's interested in this, please sign up for the newsletter and you get a free book. And so that is, oh my gosh, something about the bin, right? But beyond the bin,
So that's actually beyond the green team. So I've got a
beyond
book
the green
called
team.
Rethink the Bins.
Oh,
I know
that's what
there
it
there
is.
there can be a few. So Rethink the Bins, which is a guide to recycling and composting. So that's kind of for individuals. Beyond the green team is really aimed at businesses in saying, how are you communicating about sustainability inside and outside your organization? So there's all kinds of examples of people that I have talked to, who are in sustainability roles at companies, or maybe they're in a marketing role, and in some cases they're frustrated
Hmm.
with the lack of progress. And so it's really talking about, why is sustainability really an important thing, and how do you make it relevant for your company? And so, I mean, I would say to people wherever you work, and I especially talk about manufacturing companies, and I mean that broadly in terms of if it's a company that makes some type of physical product,
Hmm.
or perhaps a component or piece or material that's going to go into a physical product that some other company is going to make and sell to people,
Right.
then that's what I'm talking about, versus the banking industry or something like that that I am just not very familiar with. I mean, I'm a customer, but I'm not a finance expert. Um, anyway, so the idea that you do it in a way that makes sense for your company's values, and what is your company, what does it stand for? What is the purpose? What positive benefit are you providing to society? And if your company isn't providing a positive benefit to your society, something is wrong, right? So you're somehow helping your customers do something better, improve their lives in some way, and that needs to be central, right? You
Hmm.
can't abandon that.
Right.
And there are ways to layer sustainability on top of it, and ways to just reconsider the different investments that need to be made to make changes. So it's complicated, and sometimes there are also simple things that you can do, and there's things that might be very visible that are just initial steps to take. I mean, just one company that I've worked with where they said, "Oh, we are going to stop providing those plastic water bottles to customers and vendors who come by our facility, and instead we're going to get a big jug and a dispenser, and encourage them to refill their own containers, or provide some reusables, and tell employees to bring in their own."
That's
It's a
beautiful.
little thing. It's a little thing compared to maybe some of the other impacts of all the products that the company makes and all that.
Hmm.
But it's something visible that's saying we care, and it's something that all the employees can get behind.
Hmm.
And then I'm telling them, I was talked about beyond the green team. It's the idea of forming green teams, companies that are working on these things, that are coming up with those kind of programs that say, let's get rid of plastic water bottles. Maybe let's put in some better sensors so we're not wasting energy. There could be all kinds of different things that you're doing, right? Let's change out our lighting. There's many different things that can be done. If there's stuff about how to better run the equipment so that you're saving energy, all kinds of options. Anyway, that there's green teams, and the idea beyond the green team is going beyond sort of just traditional feel good activities to things that are really changing how you're doing business and involving employees throughout the company, because there's a lot of good ideas that can come from different places. And sometimes people just don't do because nobody asked.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's so good. Yes. And I was telling you also, you know, the several of the last jobs that I've worked, I've taken home the recycling because it was just not going to get done. And that was just like, and if I hadn't been there, that would just go in the trash. But so that it's an amazing thing to, and to give people that ownership, you know, like to
Yes.
work together gives people a feeling of power, and like they can really make a difference. And to have more than one person saying we should really do this would make a big difference with the business as well. Like, oh, it's not just one person, it's a whole bunch of people that really care about this. That's really
Mhm.
cool. That's really cool to think about. It's a great idea. I appreciate that. I'm looking forward to reading that. I did not read it at 11 o'clock
Good.
last night. But
Yeah, it's a fairly short book, but yeah, it takes more than just 30 minutes to read.
yeah. But and so the first one, the bigger one you were saying, Beyond the Bin, that you said that was
Re-
recycling and composting.
So Rethink the Bins is the one that came out in 2020. And that, yeah, it's really a lot about, well, what happens when your recycling and composting leaves the curb? Well, I mean, it's curbside. If you're in an apartment building, it's going to be a big dumpster. But in any case, first saying, well, what happens to it? And how can you figure out what to do with all the stuff? And why is it confusing? And why do we have all these different regulations? A lot of it is, well, look at how are things in your city. And it's interesting. One of the things I got the opportunity to do after that book came out, because it came out in November 2020, it's in a number of libraries around the country. Librarians and communities had reached out to me and say, oh, can you go give a presentation to our community on Zoom? When my
Awesome.
first book came out in 2019, they didn't ask that because it didn't occur to them. Anyway, and I presented to communities that in places that I've never been to. It was the community read for Lake Geneva, Wisconsin in
Ooh.
2021, spring of 2021. It was actually really cool. They bought a whole big box of books to give out to their community members,
Awesome.
and I signed them. So I said, okay, great. I'll place an order with my distributor. They arrive at my house. I'll sign them all. I'll ship them over to the library. And then just sometimes just learning about different things that are specific to those communities. So in
Mm-hmm.
their case, they had a situation where they didn't have any composting. I said, maybe you could all work together, and here's who you could talk to. And I don't know if they've actually done it. Maybe I should have followed up. But here's who you could talk to see if you can get that to happen, because you have one landfill in your county and it's going to be full in about 5 years.
If you're
What are you
throwing
going to
food
do
in
about
there,
that?
yeah.
Because I know one of the things in the Seattle area that we did, well, no, I can't say I wasn't any part of that, but um, some decades ago, they were worried about the landfills filling up. And that's when they got the industrial composting facility, because a lot of what is in landfills is food waste. So, okay,
Mm-hmm.
here's one big message to people is don't throw away your food waste if at all possible. If there's a way to compost. Now, I know that only 2% of homes in the US have access to industrial composting, that is where they can put their food waste into a bin that comes and gets collected at the curb. But there still might be
2%.
2%. So there still might be, though, community composting options. And there's always, you could do backyard composting if you have that. You can even compost if you're in an apartment, but honestly, then what would you do with it? You need to have a place for it. But there are community gardens. There are ways to collect the stuff. Now, I know honestly, I wasn't separating out all my food waste before I moved to the Seattle area because it wasn't collected. I tried to do a backyard bin, but I didn't do it right. It's not that complicated, but it's not like it's just 100%
Right.
simple.
Right.
You need to do it properly and make it work. And I didn't put in enough effort. Let's just say that. But that
Yeah.
was quite a few years ago. And so when it came to like, oh yes, the local waste hauler is going to give me a little 3-gallon container to put under my sink and put all the scraps in, well, that's great. And the other thing is to have less scraps to begin with. And so I've done whole huge presentations on avoiding food waste. And a lot of it is don't overbuy, especially stuff that's perishable, with the idea that, oh yeah, maybe we're going to eat this. If it just goes to waste, I mean, and I don't have the statistics on top of my head right now, but the amount of food that is grown and delivered and never gets eaten.
Mm-hmm.
And some of that waste happens all along the whole supply chain, right? From the farm to the grocery store, to all these distributors. There's many places where
Waste,
those
yeah.
leaks can happen, but a lot of it is happening in people's homes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the part you can do something about.
Yeah. Wow. That's a great message. I mean, I've heard that before, and I don't feel like we waste a lot of food, but I think it's a great message to share for sure, because clearly it's happening.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, we have a compost bin in our backyard, and we have a little compost
Nice.
bin in our kitchen to bring to the backyard, and we have a worm compost, and we have chickens, so we don't have a problem with scraps at our
Yeah.
house.
That's excellent. Yeah, and a lot of people can do that. That you
Mm-hmm.
can just if and you don't have to have acres and acres. You know, if you've just
Right.
got and I know not everyone has a backyard. I get it.
Mm-hmm.
Again, if you're in an apartment building, your options may be more limited, but you can talk to the landlord about getting a big compost container for the building.
Mm-hmm.
People could then take their stuff, and then the city or county could haul away to get
Right.
composted if that's an option. If people in single family homes in your neighborhood can do it, then there's a way,
Right.
and maybe you can get your apartment building to do it too. So that's another thing of like, put your voice out there.
Right.
If the residents ask, then maybe they'll see if they can do something about it.
Yes, absolutely. Um, okay, that's your big book. Oh my
I
goodness.
don't know. I wouldn't call it big. That's a pretty small
Rethink the
book too.
bins, is it? That was the big one that was, or I say big, but I mean big like the one that was the first one that was advertised on your website,
Oh, well, I think
right?
so. Here's the different, like this one comes up. This is the one for businesses.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and this, oh, whoops, this is my advanced review copy. But the other one, I think I'm sold out on these at the moment in terms of what I've got in stock. But this is the Rethink the Bins.
Love it.
And then this one is, oh, people can't see this anyway. There's material value,
It'll be
which
on
is
YouTube.
the
People
first
can
one.
see it if they look on YouTube.
Okay, great. All right. Well, anyway, I was just kind of demonstrating, and people can look on my website and see about the different books. So they are, I mean, they're different, but related. And it's interesting. And I say sometimes the theme and my niche, my beat is materials and sustainability. And that's actually the title of my fourth book that's coming out, that's based on material value, but it's more expanded. And that is really for both a business and an academic audience. I think a lot of students in all kinds of different fields are really wanting to learn more about how things are made and how they can be made better, and what companies are doing to change how we make materials. And where do metals and plastics and glass and paper, where do they come from, what's happening with them, and what are some of the new things that companies are doing. And I realize that that's not maybe quite as broad an audience, but there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of people who want to learn this.
Well, it's still important to learn. People might not be open
Yeah.
to it right now, but it needs to happen. It needs to be
There
out
is
there.
There is a lot more interest. I mean, so Material Value came out in 2019, and I saw upticks in sales every year since, because more people were looking up sustainable manufacturing, or they were searching for this kind of thing
Mm-hmm.
more so in the last couple of years than they were even, say, 4 years ago.
Okay, that's
So
great.
there's definitely there's a lot more interest. There's, people vary between yes, we can do something, and no, all is lost. And I think that the attitude of we can do something and we can each make small differences, and not just say, now that's enough.
Right. Yes,
Because we do
absolutely.
need to make some really big changes and that are, bigger than any individual can do on their own.
Right.
And so again, collectively, it adds up.
Yeah. Heck yeah. So I know I asked you some questions, Julia, and we talked about some of the things, but I'm just wondering if there's something that we might not have touched on that you really would like to get across. Like, do you have a specific message that we didn't touch on that you would really like to make sure is shared?
Just the importance of changing how we think as a society about consumption, and about being like consumers, like we're just supposed to buy more and more and more stuff, and realize that is not our purpose in life. So there's some shifts that need to happen. And I think people need to educate themselves about the options and realize that we need individuals, communities, governments, and businesses to all work together to solve a lot of these big problems. And there's some things that really are solvable, but it just takes a lot of behavior change, and behavior change is hard. And we need to do it.
Okay. That's a good one. Yeah. I mean, we need to take responsibility for ourselves and as a community to just be more conscious and be more mindful of what we are purchasing, and do we really need it, and or can we borrow, or buy used, or make.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, we are talking about making things. And one of the things I made recently was a ramp so that my 17-year-old cat can better get into the litter box. And I found scrap wood in my garage. And I went, and so I have this engineering background. Not everybody does, right? So I'm drawing triangles on a piece of paper and making this calculation and finding things like, okay, I need to make it at a 67-degree angle. Anyway, and I made the thing, and the cat uses it.
He
So
uses it?
there we go. Yes, and I guess I could have bought a plastic one from a pet store.
Of course you could. But that's
But you know what? I just decided I'm gonna make this. And there we go.
and it cost you nothing because you had everything.
That's right.
And you
Yep.
could have bought it. Awesome. I love that message. So, Julia, when I say the word sustainability, what does that mean to you? You have lots of thoughts on that, I can tell.
I do. And I think both of sustainability, meaning something that can be sustained for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about that, you've got to think about the long-term effect of all our human activity on the planet. And when I say the planet, it's really about people and other living creatures, because the planet will continue long after we are gone. And certainly if you talk about any person that's alive today, but even, if we don't want people to go extinct. I mean, we don't want other animals and creatures to go extinct either, but just for, the future of humanity, we need to do things in a more, again, sustainable way. What can keep going? Because exponential growth is not going to work out
That doesn't work.
long term.
Yeah.
So it's so that, again, and that is a difficult problem. And I know there's some people who say, well, let's not even use the term sustainability because we need to have, there's a lot of complex discussion around it, and it's become, oh, it's just this buzzword. We're going to say we're sustainable, we're going to say we care about the people on the planet, and that's a starting point, and there needs to be some concrete details and decisions and practices behind it that are going to make real change. And
Yeah.
that's the part that's really hard.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, well, and everyone has different ideas. So,
Yeah.
but we just need to agree on something, or, everyone do a little something. And yeah, we just have to brainstorm. We need to work together. And that is,
Yeah. And,
that,
and I think we need to have things that millions of people can do. And I know that that's something that sometimes comes up in, say, zero waste communities, is we don't need 20 people doing it perfectly. We need 20 million people doing it imperfectly.
yes, absolutely that. Everyone needs to be trying. Everyone needs to, yes, 100% that. Um, So thank you so much, Julia. Oh my goodness.
You're welcome.
You are just a wealth of information, and it's all so good. I'm hoping that people will be subscribing to your newsletter. But so how can people find you and or follow you to learn more?
Yes. So the newsletter you're talking about is on my website, jlfgoldstein.com, or yeah, jlfgcommunications.com. They both go to the same place. I'll make sure to clarify that. And if you go /blog and you can take a look at my blog, there's a subscribe on the top, and you can read all these different articles that I've written. In social media, I pretty much just use LinkedIn. So you're welcome to find me, Julia Goldstein, on LinkedIn. Reach out, let me know that you heard about me on this podcast, and
Yeah,
we can start a conversation.
right. And I'm going to add all of the links that I have on the show notes. And I think you said that you also added a recipe for chili.
Oh, there
Oh,
is. Yes, that one is, that might be, I have to see, that might be on my juliagoldsteinauthor.com blog. I will put a link to that. It's called Rainbow Chili. I wrote about that back in January when it was more the weather for chili. Right now, as we're recording this, it is August, and I don't know that a lot of people feel like making chili in August unless you live in the southern hemisphere. Um, but but yeah, it was basically like with all these different things of what I happen to have in the fridge, because that's another way to avoid food waste, is shop in your fridge and pantry before you go off to the store to buy more stuff.
right.
So yeah, it's a very flexible recipe. It's an example of what I did based on what I had. But yeah, I'm happy to share that.
That's really fun. Again, thank you so much. This is so exciting, and I love tangible things that people can take with them. You guys go to the website, subscribe to the blog, get the recipe, get the books. I got the one free book, and I'm going to be buying the others so that I can complete my collection. But thank you so much for listening today, you guys, and thank you so much for being here, Julia. I've really appreciated our time together.
Thanks. It was fun.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.